It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
All right, Brian, this next question, this is from Financial Princess. It's a friend of the show. Now, I've been using TurboTax for years, and my spouse and I are now at a point where we're ready to hire a tax professional as our financial situation is becoming more complex. Where do you recommend I find a good CPA, and what questions should I ask? The where is a harder one. What questions I ask is interesting. I would love to hear you speak a little bit, though, Brian, to maybe some appropriate expectations to have when going from being a do-it-yourselfer to hiring a tax professional. Because I don't know how much TurboTax costs these days, right? $40.
Pretty cheap.
It's pretty inexpensive.
I think it might be free if you in some aspects.
Yeah, and so I'm amazed when people, they talk about going to pair. They're just not prepared for the change that is there. You want to talk a little bit about that transition? And you can take this anywhere you want. When it makes sense, what question to ask, whatever kind of strikes you. But I'm just so amazed by a lot of times there's this sort of shock when you go from a TurboTax person to a tax accountant filer person.
It is one of those things where I'd go ask people that you are aspirationally think that you will be in their place in 5 to 10 years who does their taxes. I mean, it's just like right now, there's an influencer that I would love to find out how they have their tax, who does their taxes, just because they have a lot of commercial real estate. They also have, content creation. They have several businesses. I just love to go talk to who their tax preparer is, because that's probably going to give you a lot of insight into your life too. So don't just ask your friends and family. Also ask the people that are at that tier you think you want to be, or at that income or wherever it is. That's my question on how you go interview, how you find one. Now, the next thing is you have to kind of go into the relationship with the expectations, because TurboTax is great. I was a paid preparer. I was a CPA, did this for over 16 years, that I never was against TurboTax. Matter of fact, a secret that a lot of people don't know is Intuit not only owns TurboTax, it also owns Lacert, which is what a lot of your tax preparers, that's what I always use to prepare taxes. There was ProSystems and then there was Lacert. I used both between the different firms I was at. And that's owned by Intuit. So, your tax preparer is using a very high-powered version of a TurboTax. It's much more, because CPAs know the forms, so it's not, instead of going through, it would drive me crazy to do a tax return by going through all these questions like I know TurboTax does. Lacert and other professional software, they count on you to know where things go, so they let you, really move through things much faster. But it is one of those things, it's all about who's operating the systems. The biggest thing you're looking for with an accountant is, are they going to just check the box? Because that's what, you kind of go through the progression of TurboTax is, you've gathered your shoebox full of documents, you're downloaded them, and now you're manually inputting it by going through their questions and answers. The next step up is kind of, you could go to your, what I call the convenience preparers. That's your old H&R Blocks and all these other preparers, where they're going, whatever you show up with that day, they're going to prepare your tax with. It's not, yes, they're doing the input for you, but the data gathering or trying to figure out if there's extra solutions
kind of falls on you.
It's going to be minimized on their side, more on your shoulders. The CPA, the ideal is, now look, I will tell you, there are a lot of CPAs out there. I think they get themselves they start, because the problem with being a CPA is, you realize you don't make more money unless you take on more work. And sometimes when you do a compressed season, that's what a tax season is that, you essentially have February 1st through April 15th to pile in as many tax returns as possible. They get overwhelmed in that period of time, and it does become more transactional instead of being a consulting relationship. Because what I always wanted when I was trying to provide for clients was, I was actually trying to look for additional deductions or find credits or other things that would hopefully add value, to the point that, I even tried to challenge myself. Could I find enough deductions to pay for my fee?
I love it. That's
I
great.
felt like I was a very good tax preparer, because I did go into it with that approach, is that I was looking at it as more as a consultant to how I could help this client navigate tax preparation as efficiently as possible. But that's not the norm, and I think it's hard. So I think you just need to go interview CPAs, find out what their process is, what you can expect from them. Are they going to help you? Because they might tell you, yeah, I'm going to help you find that, but that's why I give you a tax organizer. Because you're going to go through that tax organizer, and it's going to have you questions, yes, no questions, transactions, and you're going to be like, wow, this reminds me a lot like TurboTax. Because here I am back in this narrative form again. So just pay attention to the data gathering and the expectations and how busy your CPA is. And look, if you're just doing a basic return, it might be transactional. I mean, it might be one of those things where, you go to the front office or they email you or they just send it to you in the mail. But if you get to be big enough, if you have enough going on in your life, it's not unreasonable, I think, to have expectation that you might meet with the CPA too.
Is it certain? Is it an absolute certainty that when you make the decision to hire a tax professional and you no longer prepare yourself, that you will pay less taxes than you did?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I know that who knows? This client very well still might be listening to all of our content, because she's just brilliant. And we got to the point, she had enough success that her and her husband wanted to hire a tax preparer, because we were like, you're so successful now. You got a lot of complications going on in your financial life. You probably should graduate from self-preparing. Hired a CPA. And then I found out she still was running a tax return in the background. She was still doing the tax on TurboTax, going to the CPA, and then doing a cross comparison to make sure. I was like, what are we doing here?
You're going to do the work
anyway. Well, I mean, you might as well not pay the fee. I mean, so it is one of those things. If you're just such a financial mutant, because I've mentioned next Tuesday on our live stream, we have Clark Howard coming in. Part of that story of how I met Clark Howard originally to the origin of this show was I knew who prepared his taxes. We were college buddies. I think he's going to be in town too, so he'll probably get a shout out on that show. But he was very open with me, when we talk about, now look, he kept confidential. I don't know any of Clark's information, but the preparer would let me know Clark really is so curious on how this whole system worked that he wanted to sit next to me as I prepared his taxes so he could see all the input screens and that type of stuff. That is a unique personality that's probably not a great delegator and really gets enjoyment how knowing the why of everything. You might just be preparing your taxes for him. Now, I will tell you, if you are going to be a self-preparer, please maximize the resources. I want you to make sure you are using the TurboTaxes or whatever self-preparation software. Do not, because I found this, going back in the memory banks, I remember this attorney that did everything by hand. I mean, literally filling out the tax form by hand. That's crazy town territory there. Do not, make sure you're at least using the resources to help you do this process, because the last thing you want to do is get an IRS notification because of a computation error, meaning you just didn't add up something correctly, because that is the last thing you want to do, is get on a radar just because you knuckleheaded this thing up with you couldn't even add or subtract the right line. And those forms can get confusing on that. So know yourself and go into a reasonable expectations when you're hiring a CPA. How did I make this that long of an answer?
I have no idea, but it's like watching I feel
like Financial Princess is probably like, man, tax season is already over. Can we go ahead and start talking about 2022 at this point?